Man, oh man. Before we get into that greatness that I have broken down, man, oh man, oh man. When it comes to you white conservatives and you Negro conservatives, intellectuals, you can't say nothing about Charlie Kirk, your Lord and Savior, Charlie Kirk, your good Jesus. Because how dare we hold Charlie Kirk accountable for some of the things he has said? How dare he critique Charlie Kirk? How dare black people say, man, Charlie Kirk, he says some things about black people that were not true. How dare he? How dare we call him out? And black people, black nigga conservatives are telling other black people we shouldn't speak on this. But he said some things out there that was a lie about the stats. Now, funny enough, if black women said like Dr. Bryant or Ebony K. Williams or Oprah or any of those black women that has come out in the past from the feministic Voltron, one on Oprah's platform or own, one on Star platform or own, and they came out with some stats that Charlie Kirk was saying, the black men, Angry Man, Mr. Fantastic, and the entire black manosphere flamed them. Say Molly from Anton Daniels, shout out to Molly. If Molly was saying those stats, and everybody get triggered by Molly. If Molly was repeating those same stats that Charlie Kirk was repeating, y'all would flame Molly. Shout out to Anton Daniels and the crew. I think y'all have a good panel over there. I might want to go on that panel, make some money. So shout out to Anton Daniels. All right. But y'all would flame Molly over there. And y'all would break her down left, right, center, diagonal, north, east, south, west. How I broke it down. And if I came out there and I broke it down, you nigga conservatives would cheer me on. But because I break it down on Charlie Kirk, I get dislikes in my damn chat. I get Negroes coming up talking about I'm lost. Just like how you black niggas made Pearly thing is the king of the black manosphere. You're doing this for Charlie Kirk. And if Charlie Kirk could get these stats from the black manosphere or Tommy Sotomayor, y'all are wrong too. Y'all are wrong too. Let's start off with
Americans, about 13 to 14% of the population.
Yes,
about half of all prisoners are black.
Exactly.
So blacks commit more crimes than whites do. They commit more murders. They commit more arsons. Black Americans, about 13 to 14% of the population.
Yes,
about half of all prisoners are black.
Exactly.
So blacks commit more crimes than whites do. They commit more murders. They commit more arsons. They commit more kidnappings. For example, blacks are 13% of the population and they commit 58% of all the murders.
Okay. Let's talk about it. These are obviously racist claims, but I will respond to them as if Charlie Kirk were a reasonable person.
Black Americans, about 13 to 14% of the population.
Yes,
about half of all prisoners are black.
Wrong. Just 32% of the state and federal prison population is black. That's according to the U.S. government. But it makes you wonder why Charlie feels the need to add an additional 18% to the black prison population. Could it be because his bigoted talking points only work if he exaggerates them?
Exactly.
So blacks commit more crimes than whites do.
Wrong. The word "so" is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence.
Exactly.
So blacks commit more crimes.
He's saying "so" as in therefore, as in one could conclude, but Charlie knows he's lying. Even if he hadn't just lied about the black prison population, Charlie is smart enough to know that correlation does not equal causation, but he's hoping that you don't know that. So he deploys the word "so" to make you think he's coming to an obvious conclusion.
Exactly.
So blacks
Instead, he's making an illogical, racist leap. Charlie knows that we don't have usable data about who commits crimes. It's impossible to have that data since so many crimes go both unreported and or unsolved. Charlie knows that we only have data about arrests and convictions. I'll come back to that data in a moment. What's painfully obvious is,
brother. You see, you don't have to do that, brother. I'm gonna do it for you. You don't have to do that, brother. I got you, homie. This is where he getting it from. Look at this data right here. He gets it from this crime in the United States. When you look at the total arrests, total arrests in raw numbers are 4,729,290 compared to Black Americans who are 1,800,015,144. When you look at the percentage, whites commit 69 or arrested 69.4% of the time. Right? Well, Black people are 26.6%, get arrested 26.6% of the time. Now, when it comes to murder, 51%, and robbery, 52%. But if you look at white people, we are not too far different from each other. We're slightly bigger. But when it comes to rape and other crime areas, white people beat us when it comes to that. If you look at this. Now, white people are going to make the argument that they're a natural group. They're a bigger group, so of course they're going to get arrested relative to their population size. But crime is crime. And most of the crimes committed by white people are committed against other white people. White people. That's who's doing that. So if you look at the stats, 81% of white people commit crimes against other white people. Now, mind you, these are total arrests. These doesn't mean convictions. These are just arrests. All right. Total arrests. White people dominate in a lot of categories. The only one they don't dominate in is when it comes to murder and robbery. But they're slightly lower than us. They're not lower than us by a large margin. Right? So these are statistics right here. So I'm going to break it down through the numbers. So let's go to, I had this up here. So these are the crime stats. These are from other sources. Total arrests for violent crimes, right? For rape, white persons, 10,000. Black African Americans, right? And those are the sources that are there. I might click on those, but I might not need to. For adult rape arrests, so these are offenses. Offenses versus the rape arrest. Right? Arrest does not equal convictions. Offenses, arrests are not perfect proxies for who commits what crime. Some crimes are underreported. Some arrests do not lead to convictions. Misclassifications can occur. So these numbers reflect law enforcement actions, not necessarily exactly the incidence of offending. White persons make up a large portion of the U.S. population. So even if they make up 50 to 55% of their arrests for violent crimes, adjusting for population is necessary to interpret their per capita rates, right? So let's do that. First step is 12% of the population, that's referring to Black people, commits 26% of the arrests, right? Let's look how you break that down. How do you mathematically break that down to see what's going on? You need total size of population for U.S. Black Americans. Total population, approximately 330 million. Black Americans, 43 million, 30% of the population. The stat uses 12% of the population, which is roughly in line with the Black population percentage for accuracy. Just use 43 million as the total Black population, right? Determine raw numbers of people. If 10% of the population commits crimes, calculate the number of people. Number of people committing crime equals population times 12. For Black Americans, 43 million times 12% equals 5,100,060, right? So that's roughly 5.16 million Black Americans are represented by the 12%. So when they say 12% of the population, that's 12% of 43 million. And that comes out to be 5.16 million Black Americans are represented by this 12%. That's not where the math stops. Suppose you know the total number of arrests. For example, 10 million assets per year, you would need the actual number from FBI or Doge data. So, which comes to 10 million. So in case y'all tell me I'm making it up or I'm lying, No, that's not the one I want to show. So in case you're telling me I'm making it up or I'm lying, if you look at overview, nation law enforcement made an estimated of 10 million arrests in 2019. Of those arrests, 400,000 were of violent crimes, 1 million were property crimes. Note, the USR program does not collect data on citations for traffic violations, Table 29. This is from the crime in the United States 2019. This is from the USR program. All right? Same place, everybody's getting their stats. Or that 13% commits, what, 13% is accounted for 50% of the crimes or 26% of the arrests. It's the same place they got the stat from, right? So that's how I'm doing my math. So I got the 10 million total arrests from, right? So 10 million times 26%, that's 2,600,000 arrests. So 5.60 million people would account for 2.6 million arrests. That's the math. Calculate per capita arrest rate. If you want to see per person likelihood of arrest in that group, per capita arrest equals number of people in group divided by number of arrests by group. Using our numbers, 5 million divided by 2 million equals 0.503% arrest per person. The total to really understand what 26% means, you want to compare per capita arrest rates, not just percentages for total arrests. For example, if 60% of the population non-black commits 74% of the arrests, compute the per capita rate the same way. Per capita arrests, other groups equals 88% times population divided by 74% times total arrests. This gives you a fair comparison relative to population size, right? Summary metrics. Raw number of people committing crimes. Population times 12%. Raw number of arrests by that group. Total arrests times 26% per capita arrests. So you divide the number of arrests by our groups divided by the number of people in the group to get your number. So this is how you do this right here. 12%, right, represents 43 million. So the total U.S. population is 33 million. Black Americans represent 43 million, 13% of the total population, right? If the 12% population commits crime, arrests, calculate the number of people. Number of people committing crime equals population times 12%. So population times 12% equals 5 million over 5 million people, right? Then, tell population accounts for 26% of the arrests. Number of arrests by that group equals total arrests times 0.26%. If total arrests equal 10 million, then 10 million times 0.26% equals over 2 million arrests, right? So 5 million people would account for 2.6 million arrests. Now, then you would divide the 5 million divided by 2 million, that would give you this, right? So that's what you come for that. So let's see what that looks like. According to the FBI Uniform Crime Reporting Program, in 2019, there were estimated 10 million total arrests in the United States. This is the source, and I'll show you the source. The breakdown by race is as follows. White, 4 million arrests, that's 69.4% of total arrests. Black African Americans, 1 million arrests. Other races, 300,000 arrests, right? So that's everybody else, right? This indicates that Black Americans, who constitute approximately 13% of the U.S. population, accounted for 26.6% of all arrests in 2019. All right? To understand per capita arrest rate for Black Americans, total Black population approximately 43 million. Total Black arrests, right? $43 million people divided by that million equals 0.42 arrests per person. This means that on average, there are about this 0.042 arrests, and then when you round that off, or you take out the zeros, or you move the decimal point. So this is, you move the decimal point like 1, and then 2. So you moved it into like, I think the 1,000 plate this is, right? Black Americans in 2019 are roughly 4.2 arrests per 100 individuals. While the per capita arrest provides insight into frequency of arrests, it's essential to consider the context. Arrest versus convictions. An arrest does not equate to a conviction. Many arrests may not lead to charges or convictions. Systemic factors. So example, when you have jump out boys in Brooklyn or stop and frisk, right? And like the only people who could tell this is those who live in Brooklyn or the Bronx or Queens and they experience this. You have a police officer that's like following you and stalking you. Now it's not illegal for them to do that now, right? But but the only way you could turn around and say, yo, I might be, if you see them stalking you, you could turn around and say, yo, I might be detained. And then you could ask them for their badge number. You could record their license plates, and they can't stop you from recording. It's according to New York State policy. And I might show that at the end of this, right? And you could probably report, no, not probably, you can report it, right? So what the police officers do is they on purpose antagonize you so they can have a reason to arrest you for disorderly conduct. Now, they might drop the charges or dismiss the charges later on, but them arresting you in that moment in time counts towards the arrest data that people use and say, well, see, black people being arrested at this many times shows that they're criminals. But it doesn't show that. It just shows you that there are a lot of police officers who are, I want to say, devious, because remember, the police officers, they need funding. So they gotta figure out a way to conflate the numbers to get funding from the government. So as long as they're arresting people for frivolous shit in black like high crime concentrated areas and shit, they can justify it, right? Comparing arrest rates across different racial or ethnic groups can shed light on potential disparities in areas needing reform, right? East New York, Brooklyn definitely needs to reform, right? Black people, like, I'm not taking away accountability from black folks, right? Write a check on actual numbers. Black population, 43 million black, right, people. Black arrests, 2019, 1,800,015,144. Per capita arrests, roughly 4.2 arrests per 100 black Americans per year. So out of every 100 black person, you're 4.2 arrests, right? Interpretation. Only 4 out of 100 black Americans were arrested in 2019. That's nowhere near 1 and 2, right? Crime is concentrated, not universal. A small fraction of people commit a disproportionate share of crime, but the majority of black Americans are not committing crimes. High-profile statistics can be misleading. When people see 26% of arrests are black Americans, they sometimes assume most black people are criminal, which is false. Arrest percentages overrepresent crime relative to population size, but not in absolute numbers for the majority, right? So this is a small set of people. No, not in general sense. Most black Americans are law-abiding. Per capita arrest rates are relatively low. And remember, Charlie Kirk was saying that black culture needs to be over-policed based on the misleading stats he said. And we are already being over-policed. Per capita rates for white Americans is in the same data. Crime is concentrated in specific areas. Neighborhoods are among specific high-risk population, not across all black America. Like East New York, Brooklyn, Chicago, those concentrated areas, right? To black communities themselves, yes, crime can be a threat internally. Higher crime rates in certain neighborhoods affect everyone living there, regardless of race. To white or other communities, only in localized situations where the criminal activity occurs, the notion that an entire racial group is inherently a threat is statistically false and socially misleading. Percentages can exaggerate perception. Saying 26% of the arrests are black sounds huge, but per capita numbers clarify reality. Most black Americans are not committing crimes. Crime is concentrated among a smaller fraction of the population. Context matters. Arrest numbers reflect policing, socioeconomic factors, and systemic issues, not inherent threat. Danger is localized. High crime areas exist in many communities regardless of race. It's not a racial threat to society as a whole, but that's what Charlie Kirk's narrative was pushing. Nigga conservatives, why you don't hold the right accountable? for the narratives they push. You don't want black people, the nigger liberals, to hold their side accountable, but you don't hold your own accountable. By the way, for the record, I don't like devs, the nigger liberals, white liberals, or I don't like the cracker liberals nor the nigger liberals. Just like I don't like the nigger conservatives or the cracker conservatives. Now, I voted for Donald Trump because I believe Donald Trump is the best person to carry America to glory. I stand on that 10 toes deep. But at the same time, if he jumps out there and he says something wrong, I'm going to hold him accountable for that because I voted for him. But conservatives, black nigga conservatives, you find that too hard. I guess you're on your intellectual high horse and you think you're smarter than everybody else. Niggas, typical niggas, right? Policing is not just reactive. It's influenced by policy, funding, and community priorities, right? Remember, these cops and these prisons need to be filled because they're being paid for. They're being funded. So they got to figure out ways to conflate arrest numbers to send you to jail so they can get funding. Because a lot of people's pockets are deep in that industry, right? Defining socioeconomic factors are the social and economic conditions that influence individuals' opportunities, behavior, and quality of life, income level, employment, et cetera, right? So black people, when you're describing social economic factors, you got to give examples that give what you're saying substance. Like systemic, right? What are the laws? What are the policies that was passed under Bill Clinton, under Lyndon B. Johnson, during the Reagan administration, that caused a lot of issues during black people? What are those systemic issues? I could show you them. Give me a moment. Let me find it. I could show you what they are. I could definitely show you what they are. I can show you what they are, what I mean. And now, mind you, I don't think too many people are going to have this in a debate ready for them because remember, Charlie Kirk, he was just debating them off top. And I don't think a lot of those college kids was really studying a lot of these laws or know how to articulate them, probably for people to understand. You understand? So, hold on, it's processing. I want it to load up. Hope it does. Hold on, so let me download this right quick. This is another thing I want to show. Fuck this thing won't, man. Not a shit. Oh, there it is. Systemic problems that hinder black people. So you got like these things like Great Society, urban renewal, federal construction. When it was like displacement, like they would use eminent domain to remove, building highways and stuff in certain black communities. War on drugs, tough on crime, TANF, right? So when you look at the welfare program, they wanted to get black people, single black parent households back to work. But what was happening at the time? During this time, NAFTA agreement came. So now NAFTA is taking a lot of those jobs. Let me see if I put NAFTA in here. No, I didn't put NAFTA in here. That's my fault. Right, so now with the TANF thing, right? Oh, okay, so I did put it in here. So now the welfare reform was so that you want to push single parents, encourage single black parents to go to work. But during that time, you had NAFTA, and a lot of manufacturing jobs were being outsourced. These are jobs that a lot of black people were working at in the middle class. but these things are being outsourced and pushed overseas. So now you're trying to get black people to come off welfare and now trying to look for work, but all the jobs that they will work, now they're getting low wage service jobs. And then on top of that, now you're doing something like this. They can't afford to get loans. They can't afford to go to suburban, well-grown neighborhoods and invest their money into it. Right? Public housing, you know what I'm saying? You're putting people in these project buildings, and then you're heavily policing them. Then you're removed. Like, see this, Title I of the Housing Act of 1944 plus the Highway Act of 1956. Cities got federal money to clear blighted land for redevelopment for highways. Blight was broadly defined and often meant thriving black commercial residential areas. In fact, millions of places, estimated 300K families nationally, disproportionately black. Some are moving to new public housing towers. Others are already segregated neighborhoods. Thriving districts, example, those of Green Hood, Detroit, Black Bottom, DC Southwest, New York, Lincoln Square, were leveled for highways, cultural centers, or private development. So you're displacing. So this is the systemic things that are happening. So black people, you got to bring up these things to add substance to what you mean systemic. And because a lot of Negroes on the left, but a lot of the crackers and Negroes on the left, they've taken the word systemic and they overused it. So people get tired of that. So now you got to add substance to what you're saying, right? You know, Section 8 vouchers and stuff. And in order to get this, you can't earn above your limits. You understand? And then if you're working low service jobs, and we're talking about at that time, you're not able to work manufacturing jobs to take you to buy a proper home to take you out of this. You're just stuck. These are all laws passed by Democrats and Republican Congress wrote the bill. Bill Clinton signed it. This is things that were beyond black people's control. These are things that affected the structure, right? So when black Americans or black people are saying systemic, go to the substance, look up the laws. This is history. All of this is history, right? This is history right here. Back to this. So when you say systemic issues, you got to point out what I pointed out and then intellectually, logically articulate it so people can understand what you're saying, right? Summary, policing how laws are enforced and who was targeted, right? So that's that. What Charlie Kirk and others do with 12%, the 26% stat, the talking point is black people 12 to 30% of the population, but commit 26 to 27% of arrests. It's technically true in terms of arrests, but it's often used to imply that most black people are violent criminals, or that black men as a group are a threat to white America. What the data actually says in 2019, so I already did that math, right? So y'all can pause this video, you can look this down. Look at this. Context. White America is made up of 69% of arrests. That's equated to 4.7 million arrests, which I showed you that in the example I said earlier, right? I went to the site and I showed you that number. Whites are numerically majority of people arrested for drug abuse, violations, DUIs, most property crimes, sexual offenses, rape, sexual assault. And homicide specifically, whites are the majority of offenders in white-on-white killings. Most crime is intraracial. White offenders mostly kill whites. Black offenders mostly kill blacks. So if the metric is crime is bad for communities, white communities have their own serious issues, particularly with drugs, DUIs, and sexual violence. But conservative commentators really frame it as a threat to America. Why the fuck not? Why not? Maybe I'm not saying Charlie Kirk was doing this. This is my opinion relative to my thoughts. What if Charlie Kirk was trying to help white people push a race war or start a race war against black people? And this was the excuse. And probably he would have gotten away with it too. And it would have been based off of stats that he manipulated that was not true. And we would have been the fall guy for this shit, like everything else in America. We didn't put the drugs in the community. Yes, should black people get held accountable for selling drugs? Absolutely. But we didn't bring them into the country. We didn't bring them there. I don't know who brought them in there. I don't have the concrete facts of who didn't bring them in there. But it wasn't black people bringing them in there. Same thing with fentanyl. Same thing with opioids. Things that white people are addicted to when it comes to that. Let me go back. Drug abuse violations. Donald Trump was talking about how fentanyl is coming through the borders by somebody else. I'm not going to say that. Say what it is. Who it is. But it wasn't about black people. So how are niggas the problem? How is niggas the fault for the drug problem in America? And just like you told black people, we shouldn't have took the drugs or take the drugs or been selling the drugs. Well, then should white Americans be held accountable for fentanyl, for taking fentanyl? No, because somebody's putting it in their face. But every time it's black people doing something, you don't get an excuse for the structural problems that are outside of our control. We have to take personal responsibility to things that people are doing to us. But when you look at white people, they don't take that accountability. They don't take responsibility for fentanyl. And logically, why would they? Logically, they could. Because they didn't have to take fentanyl from the Mexicans. I said it, not bad. It was alleged that the fentanyl was coming through the borders by some other group that we were having beef with over the election. White people didn't have to take the fentanyl or opioids from them. They could have took personal accountability for that, but they didn't. DUIs is a very big issue. Car crashes every day. You're being drunk, and you can crash and wipe out somebody else's family. What about rape? White women. When it comes to rape in your communities, why did not Charlie Kirk address that? Because if I address that, the common excuse that white people or white America is going to use, or a white person on the right is going to say, well, our population size. So it's natural that we're going to have arrests relative to our population size. But you're raping. You're raping your own women. So because it's relative to your population size, y'all shouldn't pay attention to that? Do you know how serious rape is? How can it affect that woman's psychology and affect her brain and affect her confidence in herself? The communities it can affect? But because it's relative to your population size, it doesn't matter, but we must focus on what black men are doing? Let me show that. Let me show you that statistic. All right. Share. Where's the thing I'm sharing? I think I'm sharing some shit here. Share. Let me see if I can show that. Look at this. Race of offender. This is from 2019. Race, sex, ethnicity, and victim of crime by race. Victim by race. White. Sex offender. Male. White. Look at that. Victim. 1,800 white women are victims by white men. And you're beating Black American men. Race of victim. So white victims. This is the race of victim. Sex of victim. So this is the race of victim. This is the race of offender. So the race of victim, white. Race of offender, white. So white men, you're raping white women at a large number. Larger number than Black. Look at this. Race of victim, Black African American. Right? Sex of victim. So this is what this looked like. And white people, you're beating. You're beating. It's like you're beating everybody. Like, come on. Especially into your own communities. And make sure I'm reading this properly. Sex offender, male, female. Right. So that's that. Let's go back to this. Intraracial crime is normal for every group. Most victims are harmed by someone of their own race. Most victims are harmed by someone of their own race because people mostly live and socialize within their own racial group. 80% of white homicide victims are killed by white offenders. 88% of Black victims are killed by Black offenders. Now, Black people, the 88%, that needs to be held accountable on our end. I'm a Black person, and I'm going to say that we need to hold ourselves accountable for that, right? But why did Charlie Kirk not hold himself accountable and his community accountable for the 80% of white homicide victims that are killed by other white people? So yes, Black crime mainly affects Black neighborhoods, but white crime mainly affects white neighborhoods too. It's just not used as a political hammer. Why not? If Charlie Kirk really cared about Black people, he could have said, man, when you break down the stats, as a whole, Black people are law-abiding citizens. It's just that a repeated offender, a subset of Black people are terrorizing certain communities. Maybe we need to do something. And we've been policing these communities for a long time, and the problem still persists. Maybe we should approach it differently. But he didn't break it down like that. He just painted Black people as a target. Conservative media often uses Black crime stats to deflect from racism by saying the real issue is Black behavior. Frame Black men as a social threat, especially to reassure fear for white voters. Liberal media often, so this is where I don't like liberals nor conservative media, right? Highlights. Liberal media often highlights Black victimization to push broader racial justice, feminism, or anti-policing narratives. Sometimes downplays personal accountability to maintain oppression narrative. What I mean by saying that? Yes, Black people should hold themselves accountable, right? But what the left does is that they keep Black people in that victimhood mentality and keep them in that Marxist bullshit so they can stay being used as a tool, as a weapon, right? The liberals don't want to see black people grow into being a powerful state either. They don't want to see black people engage in capitalism and make money. They don't want to see black people become a morally high moral group of people. They don't want to see patriarchy in their community. They don't want to see patriarchy or black women leading that community because they don't like masculinity in general. So they're going to push liberals are going to push feminism, communism, Marxism down to black people's neck so we don't compete and become one of the best races, or the best group of Americans here in America. They want to keep us in the lowest state while weaponizing us against the left. Against the right. This is why I don't like liberals either, right? Both sides use black pain for their own ends. Conservatives see we're not racist, it's their fault. Liberals see racism improves our social agenda. Neither side consistently turns the same critical lens on itself. The liberals don't criticize themselves. The conservatives don't criticize themselves. They just blame everybody else but themselves. Your point about conservative voices. Some black conservatives would debunk stats when black feminists use them, but won't challenge white conservatives using the same stats unfairly. I said this earlier. If Candace Owens, Ebony K. Williams, who else? All those black women that came out during COVID and still currently were to use the same stats that Charlie Kirk was using, the entire black monster would fry them up like bacon. Tommy Sotomayor would have jumped on them. Angry Man would have jumped on them black bitches. Mr. Fantastic would have jumped on them black bitches. Why y'all not jumping on Charlie Kirk? And he was wrong. That's a real pattern. Some feel social pressure to align with conservative white allies and avoid airing grievances that might be labeled as playing the race card. The result, selective accountability standard. Black men call out black women harshly, but let white conservatives recycle old racial crime tropes unchallenged. The 26 stat does not mean most black men are criminals or that black America is a threat to whites. Crime is concentrated and mostly interracial for everyone. White people commit the majority of the U.S. crime overall. Both sides weaponize black data for their own narratives. Conservatives try to excuse racism, avoid self-critique. Liberals to fuel policy agendas about oppression. Black conservatives could be stronger if they held everyone, including white conservatives, to the same factual standard they demand from black feminists or liberals. But y'all don't do that. That's why niggas on the left side-eye. That's why niggas like me side-eye. The difference between me is I side-eye everybody. Because y'all both making black men image look bad. Mind you, Charlie, well, I think he did critique black women. Didn't see those clips, right? But then he talked about black fatherhood. And I've done stats on here talking about black men are the most involved father. And I'm even hearing some conservative Negroes that when black women was saying niggas is deadbeat and ain't shit, and came out and said the same stat I said, now turning back on that and saying, nah, y'all niggas weren't really involved in the kid's life. Y'all don't really give a fuck about how you was just made one saying that black women were lying when it came out with the niggas was deadbeat stats. And you brought up this 70%. How is it now? Charlie Kirk is saying the same shit black women are saying, but he gets a pass. And you're man, I don't get it. What is the 30-50 claim? But commit 50% of the violent crime or arrest for violent crime. Sometimes it's phrased more generally. 13% of the population commits 50% of all crime. This claim is widely circulated in media and political commentary. But when you dig into government data, you won't find a table that states 50% of the crime is committed by black Americans in that blanket form. No such explicit statistic in FBI, UCR, or DOJ reports. The FBI Unified Crime Reporting Table breaks down arrests by race. Table 43. 26% of arrests in 2019 were black. This is other source, the same sources that I'm showing you. But arrest does not equal crime committed, violent crime or convictions. The FBI doesn't publish a percentage of crime by race. Race equals 50% number in their official reports. Misrepresentation and overextension of data. People often take the arrest share, black arrests being 26% in some years, but magnify or twist it to claim a much higher share of violent crime, or all crime, without the proper breakdown. Some claim it's with the assumption that crime equals arrest, or that arrest equals conviction, which is false. Lack of clarity on the denominator and crime definition. Crime is very broadly defined. Does it mean violent crime only, property crime, drug crimes, or all crime combined? The 50% number is really tied to legitimate data stat or methodology. Critical sources fact checks call it a myth. An article titled "The 30-50 Myth About Black American Crime" critiques this claim and notes that FBI itself states nothing about how or why black people are only 30% of the U.S. population, but 50% of the violent crime arrests, meaning that the official report don't support that narrative. Many analysts show that while black Americans are overrepresented in certain arrest categories, they're not showing any official source to commit 50% of the crime broadly. So let me go back to what that website is saying. Now, the website they're talking about, they pulled it from this. This again, this is where they're getting it from. Knowing this, maybe the 50% that they're talking about might come from murder and non-negligent manslaughter. So let me show you this. Maybe it's coming from this right here. So if you look at murder and non-negligent manslaughter, and you look in the black or African American percentage distribution, you'll see 51%. And then you see 52% for robbery. So maybe that's where they're getting it from. Maybe that's where they're getting that 50% data from. I don't know. But I don't see it anywhere else. And where's the site? Oh, it's that site. Hold on. Add. Stop sharing. Share. So the site that it's talking about is this. Let me add it. Right? And they're getting the stat from the same place. Same place. You know what I'm saying? 30-50 minute. You click the site, it goes to this. So maybe it's this murder. Maybe it's this. But I already broke it down, the stats, that is not, this does not represent the majority of black culture or the black population. This represents, in the amount 90, this is broken up in the section of murder, non-negligent manslaughter. So this would be a smaller total arrest, but it talks about raw numbers. I don't know, bro. He was just lying. Why y'all can't admit that your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ was lying? FBI UCR arrest data. Example, in 2019, 26.6% of arrests for black individuals, or 13% of the population, right? But the FBI does not equate that to 50% of crime. Bureau of Justice statistics, BGS, and CVS, or offender studies. For example, race and ethnicity violent crime offenders and arrestees gives data on offenses of offending by race for violent crime in a sample-based survey, right? But even those numbers do not show 50% in a way that supports simplistic claim. It emerges from taking some portion of arrest crime statistics, exaggerating or misapplying them. For instance, focusing on violent crime arrests in certain cities, then generalizing this to the whole country. Maybe that could be that. Maybe it's a city that this data is coming from, and they're saying the entire population is doing this. And even if it's coming from that specific city, that is happening within the race, not across the race. It's happening within Black culture. It conflates arrest with crimes committed and violent crime with all crime, typically in a dishonest and careless way. Because of these mismatched dominators, crime type confessions versus convictions, the statistic is a myth or distortion rather than a rigorously documented fact. Regardless of the facts that I show, y'all not going to care. Niggas don't care. Just like the niggas on the liberal left don't give a shit about facts and truth. The nigga conservatives don't give a fuck. Yeah, it's going to let white people, you know what? And then I'm a tether because I'm a Jamaican nigga, so I'm a tether. So me giving a fuck about y'all and how Black men are represented in America across the diaspora, because I'm not like y'all, I can't give a fuck about y'all. But it is what it is, right? Example, FBI, UCR expanded homicide data, known offenders, right? Reminder, other unknown races. So yes, the 50% figure really comes from a sheer known of murder offenders, right? But mind you, this is only like 8% difference. There's still white offenders, 40% within their own community that's attacking their own versus Black offenders. But in total, it's this number. So obviously there's a homicide issue going on within both communities. So maybe this is where they're getting it from. Maybe my fault. Maybe this is where they're getting that 50% from. But we can say 40. We can say this for them, right? 58% of America accounts for 40% of the violent offender crimes. And if they come at me with the argument that they're a natural population group, crime is still fucking crime. You still have a murder offense in your communities. But look at that. Remember, I think white people are like 190 something million and Black people are 43 million. So this versus the whatever 100 millions of white people, and this versus the 43 millions of Black people. But then I said crime is crime. So yes, the 50% figure really comes from the share of known murder offenders. But remember, it's crime amongst their own group. So maybe that's where it's coming from. But it's not all crimes. Murder does not equal all violent crimes, and definitely doesn't equal all crime. Murder is a tiny fraction of a total crime. Even violent crimes, murder is the rarest. Known offenders does not equal total offenders. In many homicide cases, the offender's race is not known or not reported. The FBI cautions that these are reported offenders, not necessarily all offenders. Extrapolation to crime in general. People take Black offenders of known offenders and they say Black people commit 50% of all violent crime or even 50% of all crime. That leap is unsupported. Other crimes, robbery, assault, burglary, drug, etc., have different breakdowns. Population comparison without context. Saying 13% of the population commit 52% of the murders sounds dramatic, but ignore concentrated poverty, segregation, and how crime is clustered in certain neighborhoods, not the entire population. Like, y'all can pause this and read this. Like, your boy Charlie Kirk is a liar. Just like y'all could come out and say Martin Luther King was a bad person or a bad human being, Charlie Kirk was a liar. And I'm going to stand on that. And I showed you at table 6. The 13% commit 50% talking point leaves out that this is largely black on black crime inside segregated high poverty neighborhoods, not a general threat to the whole U.S. population, which was Charlie Kirk's narrative. And he was pushing that to have an excuse to police black people more than we're being policed. The 50% of murder offenders who are black are almost entirely killing black victims. It's black culture. We need to stop that bullshit. Right? The data does not show 13% of Americans are roaming the country killing everyone. It shows concentrated violence inside disadvantaged black communities. Very similar to how most white homicides are committed by white offenders against white victims. Listen. Also, stop comparing Charlie Kirk to Malcolm X and MLK. Malcolm X was holding black people accountable. Martin Luther King was holding black people accountable. Martin Luther King preached nonviolence, and he still got shot and assassinated. And Martin Luther King was trying to integrate with white people. Remember, Martin Luther King pushed for labor rights of all nationalities and race. If you want to critique Martin Luther King about his whoremonger, well, you can critique Donald Trump about his whoremongering. What about Bill Clinton? Bill Clinton allegedly got his in the Oval Office. What about Donald Trump? He talked about grabbing bitches in their box. So if you're going to critique Martin Luther King that he's a whoremonger, then what about Donald Trump to the conservatives? What about Bill Clinton? What does him having to do with fucking bitches behind the scene have to do with the policies he passed and how he maybe you could argue that with Bill Clinton because he passed some laws that I suspect that Hillary Clinton influenced. Allegedly, I don't know that for sure, right? But regardless, if you want to critique Martin Luther King, that he made a speech about Margaret Sanger, a known racist, okay, cool. But does his good outweigh his bad at the end of the day? And say what you want. The civil rights gave black people rights that we did not have before them. During slavery, we did not have rights as human beings. We didn't. And it took some niggas like Malcolm X and some niggas like MLK to fight for them rights. Charlie Kirk was a YouTube content creator. Anyway, this is Kiss Shorty Gaming Nation. Click the like, share, and subscribe. I'm out.